Hello everyone, my name is Akal and I am a somatic therapist. If you'd like to find out a little bit about the work I do, you can check out my link down below this video. So, today is I believe it's the 17th. Yeah, it's the 17th video I've done on the Nakshatras as they relate to Kundalini Yoga. This particular video, the nakshatra that I'm covering specifically, which is called Anuradha, is very interesting. And this is like kind of a culmination point of sorts in terms of the energies as we progress through the cycle, the 27 divisions of a 360-degree wheel, which loosely represent the seasons, the directions, all sorts of fundamental patterns that exist in nature. So this particular energy here, so before I get into Anuradha, I should also mention that in order for you to find out whether or not this particular nakshatra is relevant to you, what you want to do is you want to look up your birth chart, your natal chart. And I have a link down below this video that'll take you to the website I use. However, the one thing is you want to look for this energy. It could be pretty much any planet could have this energy. However, the most dominant placements are going to be the moon, the lagna or the ascendant, or the sun. Again, these energies will also be pronounced in your chart if it's your north node, things like that. But again, think about moon, ascendant, and sun. So, Anuradha is another one of these nakshatras that really demonstrates its gunas quite clearly. So very similar to Vishaka, which existed before this. This is a very a conflicted, or there's a lot of turmoil in this particular placement. The fundamental difference between this placement and Vishaka, which existed prior, has to do with the tertiary layer of guna here, which is, so we have tamasic energy once again as the sort of fundamental or foundational vibe. So again, tamasic means interest in the material things, means to anchor into the material. It's a energy of inertia, so it's firm. So we have this tamasic firm energy which is focused on materialization, followed by the way in which these people are operating, which is sattvic. Again, this is very much like Vishaka, which existed, which happened prior to this energy. Now, sattvic basically means harmony and lightness. So this is about levity, this is about light, this is about harmony. This is the ability to see this or that. This essentially, the sattvic path is the middle path that is not subject or as subject to duality. Then finally, on the tertiary level, or what's expressed out into the material plane, is the tamasic energy once again, of inertia, of material fixation. So there's a conflict here in the energies that are at work. So with Vishaka, it was rajasic energy on its tertiary level, which meant lots of activity. Lots of activity which tended to lead to a lot of restlessness, anxiousness, the desire to find something else to do, to move on from people quickly. The vision was the grass is greener on the other side. These folks are a bit more loyal. And again, you got this tamasic energy on the tertiary level, which means a certain degree of fixity. And I know if you read into like yoga books and things like this, there's this generalization, tamasic is bad. When everyone's obsessed with spiritual things, tamasic seems bad because it's a firm anchor. However, when we're looking at this, Anuradha literally means little light. Little light. So Radha is also sometimes saw as like a bit of lightning. And so what this little light is, it's that sort of dim light. Let me back it up and tell you a story. So I used to go to Quaker meetings occasionally, and they were kind of contemporary Quaker meetings. And I remember the one thing that they said, and this is maybe 20 years ago, I went to these meetings. One of the things they always talked about at the meeting was this idea of being present with the light. In yoga, when I went through Kundalini yoga teachers training, same concept. It was always this follow the light, be present with the light, etc., etc. The greater energy you give to the light, the greater that light grows. The energy is the sort of activation. It's the force, the pressure, the I guess what ends up animating, motivating life is energy. So when you put your concentration on a particular point, what ends up happening is energy goes to that point. It flows to that point. And so this applies with Anuradha a great deal, because Anuradha, that's their challenge here. Their challenge is to focus on that little light. It doesn't mean that they give up on the material things necessarily, but they start to see, again, this sort of inherent dissatisfaction that exists in this sort of accumulating of material things. Because that is their basic impulse. Their basic impulse is to accumulate those material things. It's to gather and concentrate those material things. So we've got Saturn here, which is functioning. Now, Saturn is the ruling planet for this particular nakshatra. So Saturn is trials and tribulations. So you can see what I'm kind of painting the picture here, which when I get to describing the lotus, this will even make more sense, which is we've got light, we've got Saturn rulership, which is trials and tribulations. So it's trials and tribulations leading to light. And so, again, all the sort of personality characteristics that go along with this particular nakshatra are things that relate to a lot of the energy of Scorpio or Mars, which is courage and could be impulsive. Again, it's this very active energy. So it's a very active, driven energy that's always sort of learning and growing. And because the process overall, and again, keeping in line with the theme of Scorpio, which is transformation. This is the phoenix rising from the ashes. And Anuradha epitomizes Scorpio at its core. So this transformation process is seen really vividly in the story of a lotus. Lotus is like this classic imagery that it literally gets repeated over and over and over again in Vedic scriptures, etc. The lotus, though, is a really apt sort of symbol for this sign. So again, keeping in mind what happens with the lotus as the lotus grows. So you have the mud. So the mud which exists, well, first off, I should say is that the lotus is a plant that grows from the bottom of, let's say, a lake or a pond, and it grows up through the water, reaching the surface of the water where it creates a lily pad and a flower. So it's always motivated to reach the light. Again, light. It keeps coming up. So this lotus begins with the mud, though. It begins dirty. So the mud, the dirt, are the material plane. That is material fixations. That is material focus. So these folks can have a great deal of material focus and a great deal of fixation on the material plane. Again, that is not inherently wrong. And what they're trying to achieve here is that sort of, again, this is a very dharmic process. This is a very devoted process. They are devoted very much like how this lotus is going to grow up, eventually reaching the point where it flowers. It is very devoted to reach that light. And the symbol here is it's that we're using our little light to reach the greater source light, which in this case, when we're talking about the lotus, is the sun. The sun is the greater source light. So this little bit of light that the seed somehow perceives, and again, the seed is kind of representative of this kind of potential. It's ignorance. Ignorance is kind of a negative word. I don't think of ignorance as being necessarily bad. Ignorance just means latent to me. It means that there's something that has not been revealed yet. So as the seed, this latent energy this potential energy begins to grow up through the water. Again, water is always symbolic of what? Emotion. So it's moving through human emotion and empathy and understanding. And again, all the trials and tribulations that go along with human emotion. So as this seed sprouts from the dirt, from the sort of earthly fixations, up through the water, through human emotion, eventually reaching the surface. And again, all the while attracted by this greater sun, this little, what was once little light, as you reach closer to the surface of the water, becomes a grand light, a much greater light. And once it hits that greater light, it then has the energy, the impetus to then grow and sprout and bloom into a flower, which is kind of the spiritualization process. And then what ends up happening is that the flower then goes to seed, the flower wilts, the seed drops back down through the water and back into the mud in order for the process to then repeat again. So Anuradha, this process is the spiritualization process. It's the movement, it's the movement towards death in a lot of ways, because the implication here is that death is a rebirth. So again, it's this transformational process that's repeated over and over again. So the progression here is turmoil, and again, it could be dissatisfaction with those material things. These folks dig deep, have courage, Mars energy, to then sort of follow that inner light, that inner guidance, that authentic expression, which drives them on a path of radical change. And again, this radical change, and again, what's important for these folks is that they're cultivating this process with awareness, because it's, sometimes things happen in life where, some sort of pain, fear, and suffering rises up, and we don't see it. We don't see how we benefited from it. We don't see our growth. Anuradha, it's important to see that growth. It's important to see that, these turmoils and these conflicts rose and happened. So what did you get from it? What did you learn? So reflection. So the other thing about Anuradha, again, these are intelligent people. This is the theme that continues on from the previous nakshatras, which is this progression of the air element, the sort of transformation of air element into emotionality of Scorpio. So what we ended up having is we had a lot of sort of, again, deep intellect, deep mental focus. And so Anuradha, that flower, which then, which going back to this lotus concept, when that flower was growing, once it started to when it hit the air is when it bloomed and blossomed. So it's mental. So these folks, there's an attraction, and I'm not exactly sure why these references get placed on them necessarily, but there's a reference to numbers. And again, this is very highly intelligent people, with an attraction towards numbers. So some of the jobs they could associate with them are like accounting, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess if I thought about it enough, I would be able to figure out why they made this correlation. But at the moment, I have no clue. The other associations with these folks are, let's see, they're able to move through the spiritualization process to some degree, while not necessarily giving up all their goals. The other thing is about these folks is there's an association with a lot of travel. Travel is a very transformative process for a lot of people, and again, these folks are all about transformation, so there may be a great deal of attraction to things like travel, because every time we travel, something changes in us, and this has been my experience, and sometimes that change sucks, and sometimes it's great. Either way, travel always impacts me, whether it's vacation or it's forced to travel for whatever reason. Something else I feel like I need to mention about that lotus concept of like the flower uniting with air. Essentially what this ends up kind of representing in some ways is that deep sort of psychological urge. It's a deep psychological urge for union. So it's when that flower blooms, it basically blossoms into the mental sphere, or we become much more conscious of what's going on here. We can see the light more fully. And I think that's part of the beauty of this whole story of the lotus. One more thing is I didn't really talk about this much, but the god of this particular sign is Mitra. Mitra, sorry, I probably mispronounced it, but so Mitra is a contrast to Varuna. So Mitra is the sort of light of day, let's say, where Varuna is the light of night. You know, I guess you can't say night is without light. I mean, there's the moon, right? So it's kind of the light of night, but there's something about the night that conceals. And so reason why the god of Mitra is associated with this sign, again, it's this reference of light. So what is concealed at night must be revealed in the daytime. So Mitra is this light that reveals what Varuna hides. And again, this whole reference to light, this is so incredibly redundant, right? I literally keep talking about the same stuff over and over again, which is this drive towards light over and over and over again. So, and ultimately, it's a drive towards light for what I would say is the sort of nutshell with this entire sign. It's the courageous endurance for the sake of divine love. So the courageous endurance for the sake of divine love. That's what the light is leading these folks towards. So with all that said, what I kind of want to do is I want to go over now with you guys how I came to connect, I guess, Anuradha with projection 19, which I believe is called the Scout, in Yogi Bhajan's book, The Mind. Alrighty, here we are. We've got Yogi Bhajan's book called The Mind. On the back of this book, we have a flowchart. And it's in this flowchart, well, this is actually why I really kind of fell in love with this book. But what we have here is we have the chart for the universal mind. And what we're looking at here is the precipitation of the elements. And we move from least dense to most dense. So going from ether to earth. So how I managed to conclude that the Anuradha corresponds to projection 19 is you follow the flowchart here. So we have tamasic energy at its base. So from tamasic energy, we follow this line to the neutral mind, which is that sort of secondary level which Anuradha functions, which is sattvic. So neutral mind and sattvic are kind of equivalents. And then finally on the tertiary level, the third level, what we're kind of flowing out into the world with, we have, once again, tamasic energy. So we have the Scout. Judgment, what does it say? Judgment of environments through the senses. So I'm going to go ahead and show you now how you find the exercise. So you want to go through the book. You want to find projection 19. Of course, he says a little something about what it's like when it's balanced or too strong or too weak in terms of those particular energies. And of course, there's an exercise, a meditation, the posture. And so it recommends you do this exercise for 11 minutes. And I'm going to go ahead in the next segment and go ahead and show you how to do this exercise. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and teach you the exercise, which is projection 19, or the Scout, from Yogi Bhajan's book called The Mind. And this is the exercise that corresponds to the Nakshatra Anuradha. So, first thing on this is only a breath practice, meaning there's no mantra involved here. So, really you want to make sure you have a very tight focus. I find sometimes on breath practices, my mind will go all over the place. So what you want to do is you want to maintain your concentration on these things, these principles, which is when you're inhaling, you want to, again, create kind of a sensation or a feeling at your brow point like you're pulling energy in. And again, you have to suspend disbelief. The disbelief here is that you're going to inhale energy into your body through your forehead. The reality is you inhale energy in through your body, through your forehead. That's the reality. So what you want to do here is you want to bring, again, a great deal of concentration on this point. And what that will do is that will naturally pull energy to that point from within, but as well as from without. So when you're inhaling, you want to inhale and you want to follow your awareness down. And what you're doing is you're following the motion of the diaphragm. So the diaphragm, as you're inhaling, it's depressing. It's going down towards your pelvic floor. Specifically, what we're going to think about here is the point about 2 to 3 fingers below your actual navel. So that is the lower dantian, the hara, whatever you want to call it. So again, it's inhaling, third eye point, awareness goes down below the navel. You place your awareness below the navel, and you're going to retain the breath. You're going to retain the breath while after inhaling, retaining the breath for 10 seconds. After about 10 seconds, you're going to pull in the belt line. And what you want to do when you pull in the belt line and lift up your pelvic floor very, very slightly is you want to sense for a pulse around the navel. Could be a pulse, could be a spin, could feel like heat, it could feel like a number of things. You want to feel for something. And so this is before you exhale. And as you're exhaling, you want to continue to pull in that belt line. And now what you're doing is the diaphragm moves up, the belt line's pulling in, and you're driving that air back up and out. So meaning your awareness returns back to the third eye point. So it's inhale, awareness goes down towards the navel. Exhale, and the awareness goes back up towards the third eye point. So it's inhaling, awareness goes down below the navel, retain breath 10 seconds. Pull in the belt line, allow your belt line primarily the belt line, but the action of the diaphragm as well, to then drive the air up and out, exhaling deeply and completely, bringing the awareness back to the third eye point, and then retaining the breath out for 10 seconds. So you can see what's going on here. We're uniting the third eye point with our center of action, or our body's center of gravity. I don't want to go into too much detail as to why that's really important, but it is. So the mudra, or the hands, you've got right over left. You're going to touch the thumbs. And you're going to move the hand. Again, you're out in front of the heart. You're not on your chest. So think about 6 to 8 inches out in front of the heart, and you want to move the hands until you find that kind of place. Like I feel sort of a energy thing right about here. So then I'm going to bring my right hand over, touch the thumb, and so this will be the position here. So now you've set your heart. You're leading with the heart here. So you set your arms, which are an extension of the heart. So now you need to relax your shoulders, which then allows the spine to move more independently. So you want to relax the shoulders, and then you want to push your pelvic floor into the floor. Again, you're pushing, muscles need something solid to contract against. This is almost like a law of nature. So you have to use your pelvic floor, use your sit bones, pushing down into the floor, which will help the spine, then lift. Again, shoulders relaxed. Then you want to lift the chest, and finally elongating the back of the head, pulling the neck back, and there you go. You've got your position. So again, the breath pattern is inhaling, retaining the breath for 10 seconds. Awareness is down below the navel, feeling and sensing down there. And then when you're ready to exhale, after 10 seconds, you pull in the belt line, lift up on the pelvic floor. And again, what you're pulling here is a very light root lock. And then you're going to exhale. Awareness is following the pathway of the air, which is up and out. And you're going to bring your awareness back to the brow point, in retaining the breath out for 10 seconds. So after you've done this practice from anywhere from 3 minutes to 11 minutes, then you're going to want to finish up by inhaling, retaining the breath, maybe 10, 20 seconds, exhale, and then relax. I think that's everything I want to mention about this particular exercise. But again, keeping in mind that the exercises that are dealing with breath and breath retention, not so much with the mantra, it's always really important to give yourself physical anchors, places on the body to feel and sense. because when you're feeling and sensing, it anchors you into the body. If you're anchored into the body, you're anchored into a slower vibration, a slower resonance, which helps us ground. So this is a very balanced exercise, very balanced practice. Again, you're retaining breath 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out. Again, the beauty of this particular exercise with the balance, and you're balancing polarities, etc., etc. The beauty of this particular exercise for Anuradha is Anuradha has a conflict. And like I mentioned in the first part of this video, the conflict is between tamasic energy, which is inertia and density, versus sattvic energy, which is light and its balance. So this exercise allows the Anuradha native to then access their inherent neutral mind. And once they have accessed their inherent neutral mind, they can then kind of dig deep, discover what's authentic in terms of how to direct all this courageous, ambitious energy they have, how to direct it in achieving things that aren't going to cause a huge karmic mess along the way. Again, it's, that's the whole, pretty much all these nakshatras. I mean, the point is always kind of about avoiding or diffusing karma. But in this particular case, these folks are really on the cusp of that energy. So with all that said, I thank you for watching this video, and y'all have a good day.